Imagine opening your email to find years of history deleted. Only a single email remains. A ransomware request for $2 million. You think to yourself, how could this happen to me? You see, there's two types of companies. Those that have been hacked and those that will be hacked. The weight of responsibility comes crashing down on you. It's the sort of responsibility you feel when your family is craving a delicious pizza. You finally open the box only to find the most cringeworthy topping that you mistakenly ordered. Join Pineapple on Pizza podcast as John and George, along with guest executives, discuss the most common and craziest cybersecurity risks, followed by actionable tips and strategies that can be implemented to protect your cyber risk pie. Pineapple on Pizza is hosted by Omnistruck.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Pineapple on Pizza. Today, we have this great guest who is an enthusiastic summit seeker. He's a real-life programming wizard and database master, living the dream with his favorite person. He has his own fountain of youth through his 9-year-old grandson. And he's also the CEO of Verified Backups LLC. Welcome, Chris Marshall.
Thank you very much for having me, John.
Good to see you. So we're going to jump right in here and ask you our big question, which is, if cyber risk was a pizza and the top and the crust was the frameworks, what's the riskiest topping you've seen, and what topping would you equate that to?
Wow. Well, the riskiest topping I've seen on a pizza was the guy who drove up with a KFC box to a pizza place and wanted the chicken breasts put on top of the pizza before it was baked. So I can't imagine why that would be a good idea. And how do you equate that to things? I don't really know. What I know is in the cyber world, there are so many holes in people's approaches to things. And a lot of people find out all too late that that's the case.
Well, so it was KFC chicken that they wanted to put on. Was it a flavored chicken? I mean, was it like buffalo chicken or anything? Or it was
no, these were like literal bone-in chicken breasts.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask.
That's kind of scary. I mean, I've never had to pick a bone out of my pizza.
I can't see why that would be a good idea.
Well, and you were definitely correct in the fact that there are definitely a lot of holes with customer cybersecurity. So tell me this: in your role as CEO, what keeps you up at night? What are those issues that you're seeing?
Well, anytime you put yourself in a place to protect company data, what keeps you up at night is perhaps any report of a breach by anybody. And, we've done all the things and we have all sorts of security and we have all sorts of penetration testing, but, like nothing's 100%. And so what keeps you up at night is the possibility of being on the news the next day. And we work very hard to avoid that.
That is definitely something to avoid.
Yeah.
And it's not a matter of if now, it's a matter of when you get hacked and what's going to happen when, how are you going to deal with it? And have you been practiced? It's nothing like trying to do the Super Bowl, having all of your data gone when all you've got is a peewee squad for learning how to do the things. Practice makes perfect, right?
It does. And you hope that you do all the practice before you have to do the practice.
Absolutely. So I'm assuming that, you have some regulatory requirements in your business and can you tell me what kind of, you talked a little bit there about, in the encryptions and some of the other things that you're doing, but tell me, why are you doing those? I mean, is there a regulatory reason for that?
Well, so I've gone through a NIST certification process with my business. And NIST is very specific about encryption and standards for backing up and testing and so forth. I've also gone through HIPAA compliance, and HIPAA wants everything to be transmitted securely and encrypted. I mean, almost everything I can still, call Office Depot and order a printer without having that encrypted, but just about everything else has to be encrypted in transit and encrypted at rest. And so every decision we make is mindful of those two security standards.
I mean, if you're ordering that printer over the web, then I'm hoping it's encrypted at least.
Sure.
And now we just got to figure out how to encrypt printers.
Right.
Well, great. So tell me, so what exactly, the solution, tell me, how do you help customers? What do you do to help people sleep at night?
Well, we give customers a second line of defense in their backups of their most important information. So what we discovered over the last 30 years is that if a customer has a database like payroll or construction database, accounting, CRM, ERP, that kind of heartbeat of your business stuff, we found that the business owner really has no idea if that backed up correctly last night. And what I mean by that is, was that backup successful and recoverable? So Veeam Software, one of the largest backup providers, does a big study every year. And the results of their last study was that 58% of backups are unrecoverable. 58% of backups fail. And unfortunately, people don't know until the moment when, sort of the moment of truth. So fortunately, when we get in our cars, they stop more than 58% of the time when we have to. So that's quite a scary number.
I often wonder if the statistics are followed that closely by the service providers that the smaller businesses may use. Because what I found is that at least there's a market, of managed service provider market, and because they're generating revenue, you are their revenue if you're one of their customer. Yeah. So they better get it right. And ultimately, I think that I've seen better backups with managed service providers in terms of backup stories of, hey, yeah, we backed it up and it was good. But the customer doesn't often recognize it as necessarily as a priority. If they don't use a managed service provider, it's like, yeah, it's backed up, and have you tested it? Well, no. So I'm curious, is in that managed service provider community that are out there doing these backups, are they your market? To make sure that they are backing things up correctly, or are you going just directly to enterprises, or is it more of a small business or large business, or where do you see the biggest problem?
Well, the MSP market is very interesting, and like anything, there's good, bad, and ugly. I mean, I guess like pizza toppings, right? So I just spoke with an MSP this morning that has a comprehensive schedule. And if you are their customer, they're going to do full backups every day, and they're actually going to do a full restore test every quarter. So 4 times a year, they're going to recreate your whole data environment somewhere else and make sure that that whole process works. But I've been talking to MSPs for 3 years, and a lot of them just don't do that. And so what I find is whoever sets up your backup, whether your in-house resource does, whether your MSP, you can't ever assume that it's going to be flawless and that it's something you don't have to think about. I mean, I guess it would be like saying, well, my cardiologist checks my heart once a year, so I don't have to pay attention to what I eat or anything else. And that would be crazy, right? Because your cardiologist doesn't follow you around and see what you're doing. So I find a lot of MSPs set up backups and don't talk to me about a recovery or restoring schedule. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And there's good, bad, and ugly.
Yeah. And we actually mentioned the NIST framework. I mean, that is something that we use. And that is one of the questions that we ask is, when was the last time you actually tested your backups? We're looking for that quarterly. There's lots of good controls and information in that NIST CSF framework to help cover those items that maybe get forgotten, that are day-to-day tasks that people just don't pay attention to.
Yeah, and some of the frameworks are even looser than that. So SOC 2, which everybody talks about as this, sort of proof that my company is doing everything right, requires an annual restore test on your data backups. So does HIPAA. And I'm thinking, man, if you do a restore test in January and you have a data loss in September, you could potentially be stuck out of 8 months of data if you've picked up a problem or ransomware or any number of things along the way. And once a year to me is crazy.
Lots of standards that are that way. Once a year pen test, once a year things that you you ask yourself how long it takes for those things to happen. That's one of the reasons that we started OmniStruct, was because it was too long for us to come in and do an audit on a customer. And many times what we would find is that they would make a mad rush in the last week before the audit would come in. And, you could tell because everything was very shorthanded and, very, during the audit, you could see that they hadn't actually practiced anything. They knew what was coming, but didn't have time to actually prepare.
Well, and it happens in everyday life. My wife, we were getting ready for bed last night. She said, "Did you set the alarm?" And I said, "Absolutely," and ran over and punched the button. So I think what you're seeing also, John, is people rush to do it at the end, but that just means that that's not part of their normal routine, right? Like if they have to change their routine because they know the auditor is coming, then they don't have a good routine.
Yeah, the routine.
And that's one of the reasons that's one of the things that we're trying to solve for customers is to make that more routine. And I have to say that I think there's some. So you were talking about bedtime. One of the things that I've got is I have an Alexa, and so when I say good night, Alexa, good night, what it does is it turns on my fan, turns on my alarm, turns off my light, and then starts playing music for me at night. So I think there's some things that we might be able to automate and make a little bit better, but they still need to be double checked and make sure that everything's happening the way that it's supposed to.
Right. So maybe we need an Alexa for business. Alexa, safeguard my company, and it turns on your backups and your NIST and all this other stuff.
Yeah. One of the things that we look at, though, is that every company is a little bit different. That's why the pizza and the framework is that crust, but every company has their own layers of topping that they put onto those pizzas, because every company is a little bit different in how they operate and how they make revenue, and we want to be cognizant of that when they're implementing cybersecurity.
Sure.
So, all right. So tell me, how are things now? I mean, so you're tell me more about your solution. So you're doing backups, and so I mean, is yours the Alexa of backups, where if something goes wrong or a backup doesn't happen, it automatically fixes it, or reminds me to restore it once a quarter? Tell me more about your solution.
So my solution was really driven by the notion that you don't know if a backup is restorable unless you restore it, right? But nobody has the time and overhead to restore their stuff every day. So our approach is we're going to back up your most critical data, and we're really focused at SQL databases, MySQL, coming soon as Oracle, coming soon as Postgres, the stuff that's harder to back up natively. You can't take your payroll database for 1,000 employees and stick it on a thumb drive and take it home. Like that's actually how some people do backups, but that doesn't work. So, and Veeam has pointed this out. They said that, look, the only way to know if a particular backup is recoverable is to recover it. So for our customers, we install a small agent on their data server that makes a database snapshot once a day, encrypts it with government level encryption, and then sends it to our server on AWS, and our server does a full restore every day. So this is the distinctive between so many other approaches, is that 365 days a year, we know that particular backup is good. And then we keep it encrypted in our vault for between 30 days and a year, depending on your preference, so that if there's a ransom situation or something, we can go back in time and find a good copy. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
So the secret sauce is really a daily restore. And part of our process was we did a patent search of 120 million patents in a bunch of countries, and nobody had ever registered that idea, which is crazy to me because it doesn't seem like, it's not like I invented a spaceship, right? Or, a Tesla car, but nobody had ever registered that process. So we did, and we got a US patent on it last year. And, now that, I have a patent, we can get together and have a cup of coffee or something exciting, right? But it says that Microsoft isn't doing what we're doing, and Veeam isn't doing what we're doing. In other words, these guys are pushing things out to the cloud, but the receiving end is not checking to make sure it's fully recoverable, which could involve, if you have a crypto virus, a lot of your files are encrypted or compromised. So that thing may copy, and you may have a checksum that says, look, I see the same bits on both ends, but the thing's not recoverable and you won't know it.
And you mentioned databases. I mean, do you also do regular files as well?
We do have backup solutions for regular files as well. If somebody wants a full server backup, we can absolutely do that.
Great.
So what is the secret behind, well, without giving away your secrets, what is the secret behind successful backups if you are a business that has an IT department?
Yeah.
Not MSP, but like an IT department. What should that look like?
Well, there is the old 3-2-1 rule. You want to have multiple copies of your data in multiple locations on multiple storage media. And so, I literally have seen companies in recent months where they use the purse backup system. So the CEO pulls a hard drive out of her purse and plugs it into the server and takes the server hard drive that was plugged in and sticks it in her purse. And that theoretically happens every day. But number one, she has no idea if the files are going on there correctly. And she called us to set up a server backup because she said, look, I'm out of town for a week and nobody's swapping that out. So that hard drive backup doesn't accomplish the 3-2-1 rule. You don't have it on multiple media. You don't have it in multiple locations. And, if you have a fire, you're going to lose your backup drive. So,
From a hardware standpoint, then you got to buy the same server, you got to buy the same hardware. There's all kinds of things that go along with it. Did you pull it out while it was copying a file? There's so many things that were wrong about that.
And I can't tell you the number of times people have talked to me about, we used a tape backup system, and tape can be great, but we had a fire and all of our tapes were blank. All of our tapes were at Iron Mountain and they were all secure and they were in these locked boxes and they were blank. And so, I guess to me, the thing is test, test, test.
Absolutely.
I had a CEO years ago once tell me, let's think traditional brick and mortar, and kind of a factory situation. Not a lot of compute going on besides administrative and billing and payroll and that sorts of thing. Right? And I remember having a discussion about, disaster recovery and what happens if you have an issue and you need to back up. And I remember he kind of looked at me and he picked up his pencil and he showed it to me. That was his answer. Like, we'll just go manual. Now, I don't think you would see that happen today. Right? Whether or not clearly that even back then that wasn't practical. I haven't been around that long. So definitely this was not, the 80s. This was more recent. And I would say that at least from the perspective of shock factor, I was shocked because I'd never had that happen before. So, but not surprised at the same time because, ultimately, that was prior to digital transformation. And I think that's when I think about 3 copies of everything, wow, that just in the back of my mind, that's going to be expensive. Is it expensive?
It would really surprise you. Storage costs on Amazon are pretty reasonable. So I have a client that sends me 30 plus gigabytes of SQL data every single day. And to keep that on hand in individual daily copies going back a month is like $2 a month. So you can really engineer it. And then the flip side is, how costly is it if you have to start over?
And I think that's the factor that I don't know that it's something that is thought about every single day by the CEO or even the business owner, for that matter, and smaller businesses, because it's just kind of in the background. Hey, backup's good. Yeah, as far as I know, until they get bit. So
I have a great story. I got called into a customer. They had a payroll database with 350 employees, and they got a crypto virus. So this wasn't ransom, but it was a virus that deleted every file on every hard drive in their whole office, servers, workstations, et cetera. I think these people should be shot or something. But what they found out is that their payroll database, SQL-based, had not backed up for 9 months. And they didn't know it because it was a 2-step process. And step 2 was sending them a happy email every day. But step 1 had quit, and they were backing up. They were faithfully backing up 9-month-old data every single day.
Yikes.
And as a result, they were in the People's Republic of Illinois. They had to have complete payroll records. They had to bring in senior management to make 42,000 manual payroll entries into their database to get all that data back. I mean, they literally took a daily record for 350 people, and Joe worked 8 hours and George worked 3 hours and John worked 4, they had to put that all in because that was how they paid people, but that was also how they billed labor to their jobs. And again, they all thought they knew, they all thought it was good. And I hate when I see that people have to find that out the hard way.
And not backing up at all, or not doing it properly, or not, I feel maybe one and the same, because you get the same result with either. You're just spending money in one area, where if you just hadn't backed it up at all, you'd probably be in the same situation. Yeah. That's not the suggestion or the recommendation, of course, but that always points me towards that concept of, how do you know as the executive that backups are working? And you put this, or many successful CEOs will say, hey, own the job so the job owns you, right? So take ownership, that's you're responsible for it, right? And then there's a degree of trust that goes on there, whether it's with the CIO or a director IT or something of that nature. Yeah. So what is an IT, lead supposed to do when they're being told by a regulatory framework that once a year is fine, and they're just doing the minimum requirement?
I think you have to sort of use your best judgment, and maybe you can analogize from other areas of life. So, like I said, my wife literally tests our alarm system every night by asking if I turned it on. Is there anything else in your life that you would only check once a year? Would you only check the oil in your car once a year? Would you only check the tire pressure? Or when it's time to fly somewhere and you get on the airline and they say, we're happy to let you know that this plane was last serviced a year ago. Would you sit on that flight, and would you allow it to take off and fly you somewhere? So we live our lives dependent on redundancy and dependent on testing all the time. So when somebody reads that in one of the standards that says once a year, I just think you have to have a little bit of professional judgment and ask if that's how you would run anything else in your life.
Well, I'm convinced that your patent and what you're doing, verifying the backups are going to work every day. Who wouldn't want that?
Right.
Simply stated. And, today, I can't think of a single person that doesn't already have that expectation with a smartphone and the pictures that they're taking of their families every day.
Yeah.
So I think you're right. It takes stories and perhaps, positions of risk to justify investments in time and or money. And I would agree. I'm not aware of any backup solution that verifies that the backup will recover, rather than the backup completed.
Right.
So
it's a crazy thing. And it's a bit like life insurance, right? So I have 5 kids, have a very busy life. They're all adults now, but I still have life insurance. And I actually have a backup to my main policy to protect against some other contingencies, because I don't know. I'm 58. I think I'm going to live a long time. I think today is probably not my day, but I can't say with 100% certainty. And so I have other things. We have all wasted money on car insurance in the last year, right? But these are things we have to have. And I look at a good backup as insurance for the succession of your business and for the jobs of your employees. And I think every business owner thinks about fire insurance and flood insurance and, a variety of things. This needs to be in that pile, because I, as the CEO, have a responsibility to the people that are on my payroll to keep the doors open.
One of the things that a lot of CEOs that we're seeing, they're looking at cyber insurance, and for many of those, there are many requirements, including backups and testing, that are part of getting that cyber insurance. Just like for life insurance, we want to make sure you're not jumping out of airplanes or anything, or that there's an exclusion for that, right? So, yeah. Absolutely having those needs for cyber insurance to help cover that and ensure that the business is going to continue after something like that.
Right. I read the other day that the average ransomware claim is $1.33 million.
Hmm.
And
that surprised me.
I think that's small potatoes compared to some of them.
Yeah. Some of them are, and we've seen, because of what we do, we're often involved in, I guess what you refer to as privileged and confidential work product.
Yeah.
So it's under attorney-client privilege, right? And so, the big sticky point always is, at least in those situations, is, making sure that you understand what was actually taken, right?
Mm-hmm.
In terms of data and how it happened, right? And speaking on the, let's call it the digital forensics circuit, so to speak, which both John and I have spoken at conferences in that regard.
Yeah.
It was very common to hear people talking about the backups getting infected too. And so
Right.
I'm curious if your roadmap, that'd be great to verify that it can be recovered, but can you in somehow maybe add to your roadmap, or do you have something on your roadmap to actually inspect backups for malicious content? Obviously, encryption, maybe not easy, but where's your path on that?
So that's a fascinating thing. And there's lots of players in that market. There's the antivirus people and the anti-malware people. One thing is, if your system gets compromised to a point, you're not going to send backup files anymore. And we'll detect that because you remember in school when the substitute teacher would say, well, anybody who's not here today, raise your hand. So we always thought that was funny, but we're looking for files that have not come in today. And then we're looking for files that have come in but haven't restored. And again, because the file is compromised. So in that way, if you're my customer, George, and I suddenly stop getting your files, I may know you have ransomware before you do. Or if I get a file and it's compromised and it won't, and the way the files are structured, I'm not going to be subject to that infection or virus or whatever. But if I'm getting something from you and it's not opening up, again, I may know that you have ransomware before you do.
Yeah.
Does that help?
Yep, that makes sense. That's good perspective.
So tell me, Chris, what events do you go to? Where can people find the more information about backups and the frameworks and encryption and all these things?
So I think I probably need to get out more often. I haven't gone to a lot of events. I've gone to some industry stuff that is really geared for MSPs, like stuff with Robin Robbins, and I've looked at like storage tech and some other things. I just haven't put a lot of, for like 2 years, nobody went to any events anywhere. And that's when I was getting this business off the ground. But yeah, DRJ runs some good ones and there's some other stuff on my radar.
All right. Well, how about books? I mean, do you read much? And if so, are there any books you would recommend for people to read?
Typical IT question. Can he read?
I didn't say RTFM, right? I mean,
No. So I enjoy a good technical book. I enjoy a lot, and I'm just looking over at my bookshelf. I read a lot of stuff on traction and positioning, business development, personal stuff. I love things like the 12-week year, atomic habits, things like that. How can you make the most out of the space and time you have in front of you without working all the time? Because who wants to do that?
read. And so, I mean, looking at that and trying to figure out how to get that 12-week work year, right? What excites you about the future? What things what are you looking forward to? So
it's fun to build a business that's a SaaS product, because there is a point where the subscriptions are sort of self-sustaining. And we're definitely getting closer to that. And then honestly, what excites me, and this sounds crazy, what excites me is getting that phone call and restoring that company. Getting that phone call and their second line of defense turned out to be the one that the football player couldn't get through. And we have their encrypted copy and it goes on a new server. And I've done this at a company that was, like I said, struck by lightning, restored them to within 24 hours and did it all from a beach vacation. So those kinds of things are fun. Like, you don't want anybody to have disaster, but you want people, if they're going to anyway, which they are, to walk away clean.
If only we could plan when accidents happen, right?
I'd like to schedule that better. Yeah, But no, it was this company used the same process. I'd set this up for them 5, 6, 7 years ago. And when something hit 5 years after I'd installed their backup, we were current and life was good.
Well, excellent. So tell me a little bit more about you. How does somebody become Chris and executive of this cool backup technology with patents and everything? I mean, what journey did you get here? I mean, what schools did you go to? What previous work did you have? Sure.
So I was that kid growing up that was really interested with computers. So like I went to Radio Shack when they had the TRS-80. Do you remember that?
I do.
Yeah. It's a great little computer. It had 3 error messages: how, what, and sorry. And then the Apple II came out, and actually bought one of those with my summer job earnings and used that for the family for a while. Went off to Washington University in St. Louis to major in computer science, and decided I didn't want to sit in a cubicle all day. So I switched to psychology because people are so fascinating. And everything you do, no matter what tech it is, it's with people. But then, I had this kind of bent for technology and I found I was good at it. So I went back and started my own business programming in 1993, when John was 10 and George was 12, and been doing that ever since.
Not quite there. I was actually out of high school. I had a job for a while, so I was working in the computer industry already. There is some gray here, believe it or not.
Yeah, no, look, every time I go to the barber, there's more gray on the floor.
And who's that? Who is that, right?
Yeah. So I've just done programming for companies as big as Boeing and Dollar General, and then as small as, mom and pop shops and everything in the middle, all around automation and making workflows happen without all the work. And so this became an extension out of that. Like I just figured I was going to do that all my life, and I still do some programming, but I seized this opportunity when it came.
Excellent. So let me ask you this. I mean, if you could go back and give your previous self, your younger self, advice, what would that advice be?
Wow. That's really hard. And it's not that I live this perfect life. I would just say, charge more and work less. I think a lot of entrepreneurs undercharge. And so because they undercharge, they have to work 70, 80 hours a week to make it all work out. And I've gotten out of that mold.
So that leads us into the next question, which is what do you do outside of work? What are your passions?
Well, anything outside of work. So like I'm going to run later today because it's gorgeous in St. Louis. I love travel. I took my daughter to Egypt 6 years ago, planning a trip to Greece with another daughter. Took my son to Iceland. And then that same kid and I climbed Kilimanjaro last year. So anything like that. And maybe if it's a little bit more extreme, my wife's like, "You're nuts. You're going to climb the biggest mountain in Africa." I'm like, "Yeah, it's not Everest. There's no technical, there's no ice picks, but just I have a real sense of adventure." And, John, if you called and said you want to go back to Asia for a couple months and I could pull it, I'd join you tomorrow.
I was there and I did some shipwreck diving while I was there. So scuba diving and definitely did some other diving and on some of the reefs. Absolutely gorgeous, and have that same passion for traveling and seeing the world. I've been to Europe and Australia and now Asia, all through Central and Southern and South America.
It broadens your perspectives. It broadens your perspectives, and you meet so many fascinating people that way. And I still keep in touch with people I met in Africa and different places.
Absolutely. Well, so tell us, I mean, Chris, how can people reach you? How do people find you?
So really probably the best way is through LinkedIn or by email, and we'll put that in the show notes. I don't do Twitter. I don't know why. It's not my mold. And, we'll see where that goes. But those are the best ways. We can put my phone number in the notes too, if that's appropriate.
Okay. Well, great. Chris, I appreciate all your insight here and definitely look forward to the technology. We definitely have some customers that we see that need help with their backups on a consistent basis. And so we look forward to introducing maybe you to some of them and having some good conversations.
Yeah, it would be an honor to help.
So that's it, audience. To our audience, thank you for listening. We hope you've learned something today, or laughed, or at least had a good time, and maybe want to go traveling, or but anyways, tell somebody about this. We'll give you some travel advice, if nothing else, and back up your stuff before you go. So again, Chris, thank you for your time. And there it is. It's been another great episode of Pineapple on Pizza with your hosts, John and George. We'll see you next time.
See you next time, folks.
Thank you all for joining another great episode of Pineapple on Pizza. You can find show notes, links, and resources by visiting omnistruct.com/blog. And a huge thank you to all who are preventatively protecting organizations from cyber threats.